Okay, we're live recording now. Okay, today's training, we're actually going to be going through what we call a typical payroll review process. It's by no means the exact method that people should use to review the payroll, but we kind of give them guidelines of how we actually recommend reviewing it. And as part of that, it'll actually also demonstrate the various reports and how you look up certain items if ever there's a question on someone's pay, whether they think they got overpaid, underpaid. Of course, as we know, no one actually ever complains when they get overpaid, but certainly we will hear about it if they get underpaid for sure.
Absolutely.
Now, part of our payroll setup, as you guys remember, is that we usually will ask the distributor exactly when their pay period runs, whether it's weekly or biweekly. And then we also ask what is the first day of their pay period. Now, for this demo plant we have that I've been using here, we have this plant set up as a biweekly payroll. And the payroll actually, first day starts on a Monday and runs Monday, 14 days, ends on a Sunday, basically. So now, whenever a distributor comes in, again, we can certainly modify that. A payroll can start on a Monday and run weekly. That's all part of the initial setup so that we tell the system actually what to do. Now, whenever a distributor actually goes in order to start reviewing reports, the first thing we always tell them to do is to go to the DSP comp page, go to DSP runs, and view the run log. Now, this is very important because we want to make sure that the actual payroll ran and was completed before they started reviewing reports. It goes without saying, if your payroll hasn't run yet, there's going to be no data there. And if you happen to view the reports while the system's running, you're going to get some pretty goofy-looking data because you're going to say, hey, how come things are doubled or I'm missing items? That's because the system's actually processing and you're viewing a report while it's actually trying to get the report together. So the first thing you always want to do is make sure that your payroll completed. Now, we have on the created by column here on this page, there will be a scheduled run user ID that actually distinguishes when the system actually runs the payroll for the first time at the beginning of each pay period. You can see here this pay period goes from 8/7 to 8/20, and this payroll ran, what's it say there, 10 minutes after 10 is when it actually started. Now that's kind of an early on a Sunday. Normally, under most circumstances, payroll doesn't run till the afternoon or evening. Again, it depends on how the setup actually is, but we usually won't run it first thing on a Sunday morning. It's obviously there could still be some operational things that need to be entered, so the actual official production run would be later. But the first thing that the distributor would want to do is come in here and make sure where he sees the schedule, he or she sees the scheduled run, that all four of those processes say completed. If they don't say completed or he doesn't see anything to schedule on for that date, then we advise them not to look yet because, again, they're basically going to be wasting their time for the aforementioned items there, either data not there or incorrect data. So that's always step one. Now, once everything says completed, they can go ahead and start reviewing their payroll. And again, it depends on, we have some distributors who actually do stay awake and start looking at payroll Sunday afternoon, late, around dinner time. Others wait until they come in first thing on the morning, after the payroll runs the previous day. Again, there's no right or wrong. It's just a matter of making sure that everything is completed before they start reviewing data. Now, as far as payroll reports go, we actually have three reports. I shouldn't say three reports. We have three sections that reports are available, and they're under the DSP comp tab. We have the view comp results, DSP comp results, and DSP pay summary. I'm going to go through each one of those in a certain order, and this is kind of how we recommend people start actually reviewing. The first one we're going to do is the DSP pay summary. Now, on this particular page, there are a total of 4 reports that you can view. First thing you want to do, of course, is make sure your plan is selected. You can certainly select payroll periods. I am actually going to go back in time here because we do have some good data during pay period 14 here, from 7/26 to 7/9. So I'm actually going to select that date so we can actually show you some good data. Once that pay period loads up, you do have some secondary filters that load. You can actually view some of the reports if you want to view it by a DSP, by a route, or what we call WAD route, and I'll explain the difference of those momentarily. Again, you can certainly select secondary filters. Normally, we recommend they be left in all. If you're reviewing the whole payroll, it makes sense to actually pull up all the data at once. Then at the kind of the bottom of the page here, we have summary group. There are 4 reports: the DSP summary by route, route summary, and WAD route summary. First one I'm going to open up is the WAD route summary. We'll put the radio button there. And once I do that, I need to click on the load button to actually load the data. Now, what the WAD route report does, from the word WAD actually stands for Work Area Design, which is part of our mapping table. Basically, whenever the subscribers come in, you guys send us the subscriber file. Based on each plant's geography, we have boundaries set up, and all the street segments are pretty much assigned a given route value based on the information that we get from the distributor. The system will automatically, based on how that is, we will automatically assign a route value to each subscriber, and thus that's what actually produces the route books in the middle of the night. So that if you have 5 subscribers on 10 Main Street in a zip code, they all will show up on the same route. And the WAD Work Area Design route, actually, that's where they actually start out every morning. And when I say start out, that's where the mapping software is initially going to put them. Now, we also have a report that says route summary. The difference between WAD route and route summary is on the route report, there are functions you can do to actually move subscribers in between routes based on needs for that day. It's a temporary move. So, for instance, Mark, let's say you were on a route. You're a great carrier. Hopefully you are. And I was in a jam. I'm a manager. I was in a jam and needed some help on the route. And I said, Mark, can you do me a favor? I had this route. It's right next door to yours. The carrier didn't show up, and I'm kind of in a bind. I'm short-handed. Can you help deliver that route? If the answer is yes, obviously I'm going to pay you for that. Now, obviously, 2 ways to pay you would be I could do a manual adjustment, or actually within the system, what I can do is I can temporarily move those copies from a payroll perspective. I can move those copies from the route I asked you to help on, from the route I'm doing that I need help on, to your route. And what that will do is that will give you extra copy pay. It'll almost be like your route grew, twice as high as it normally would. And the system would actually pay you for all those extra copies at your current copy pay. Now, there's pluses and minuses of doing that. For instance, if your route pays 25 cents per copy and the route I'm asking you to help out only pays 10 cents a copy, if I move those copies over there, what a route normally pays 10 cents a copy is now going to pay 25 cents a copy. So some distributors like to do that in another sense to say, hey, can you help me out? I want to pay you your current rate. Others like to do adjustments to say, well, look, the route actually only pays $25. I can't really pay you like the 50 you might make on your route. So I'll just do a manual adjustment. But that's actually the difference.
It picks up whatever your route pay is, not
Correct.
what the route pay for the other route is.
Correct. Yeah, that's correct. Because basically you're just moving copies and adding to the total of the existing route. So it is when the calculations happen, it is going to calculate that. And that's something we warn distributors of, again, because it is easy to move the copies, but it may affect what you promised the DSP. Actually, I always say DSP. I try to say carrier sometimes. But it may affect what you promised them. In some cases, you may say, hey, I'll give you $25 extra to help out in the route. And again, when you move the copies over, in theory, you might actually pay them more. You may actually pay them $35. It depends on, like you said, what the difference is in the copy pay. The copy pay is about the same. It'll be pretty close. The carrier might make $24.50 as opposed to $25. But that is something you do want to be careful if you use that functionality. This way, the carrier knows, again, you're not either over or underpaying the carrier. And obviously, like you said, when the carriers get underpaid, they're certainly going to be grumpy. And then, of course, if you have underpaid them, they're less likely to want to help you out again if you're the gem. So we always want to make sure we tell people that to make sure that the pay comes out the way they want it to. But that's actually the difference.
Yeah, just one real quick question, and this has got nothing to do with this portion of it. So if I did that, because the reason that they would want to move the copies over is they can reprint a route book that actually puts them right on that same route.
Yeah, there's other functionality that they can do that to actually combine the route, and when they combine the route, they can click on a certain button or two that will actually automatically move the copies and pay them for the day. The manager doesn't have to do anything else.
Right. So if I wanted to do it that way, could I not? Let's say that I promised them $25. And by doing it, moving the copies, it makes $35. Could I just do a -10 adjustment to get them back to that 25?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's fine. Okay. Again, it's all a matter of perspective. When I've done something like that, believe it or not, I would have carriers come up to me and say, hey, what's this $10 deduction here? What am I getting? Why are you taking money away from me? And they overlook the fact that hey, I promised you 25 and I paid you 35, so I'm taking 10 back. It's just a matter of perspective. Some people forget to look at the part one and they just look at the negative. part two, thinking we're taking money away. So
of course, they don't care about giving them money.
Exactly. They don't know that you overpaid them. They don't mention that. But that, again, that's just a matter of perspective. So that's why we mention to people that will work, that scenario. Again, it's just a matter of it being properly explained to the carrier so they know what to expect, or when they get their paycheck, just be prepared to explain it so they can see the numbers and that you're giving them what you promised them, basically. It's the bottom line.
Okay.
Yep. So what will happen is depending
between a wad and a route.
Yep. So
okay.
yeah, and that's basically what happens is the wad route will give you the data based on where the customers were. If none of that happened, everybody starts out on the route. When the route books process, the route value actually ends up. It can be different because if you did move copies, you may see different amount totals on each one.
Okay.
So that's the difference between the two reports there. And what we use this report for, the wad route report, this is a good way to say, hey, what does actually a route pay for a given pay period, whether it's weekly or biweekly? It saves you the trouble of actually saying, well, look, I had this route. It was vacant 3 days, and I put a carrier on for 2 days. That carrier didn't last. I tried 2 other carriers. They only lasted. So you end up having all your pay scattered across 4 or 5 different people, plus the route was vacant at some point. So if you had to say to someone, what does this route pay this past week, biweekly period, you'd have to do all the math. Well, what the wad route does, it actually kind of bypasses all that. It says, hey, here's where all the customers were. And actually, I did load up the report. Here's all the customers were. So assuming that, nothing happened and, the route was filled for all 14 days, this is exactly what would have happened on that route. On this particular route, there would have been a draw of $749. Based on the copy rate pay, it would have paid out $47. There would have been $8 on complaints. And in this case, no adjustments or no tips. And the total net earnings for that particular route would have been $39.80. So that's why that one particular report is useful. A lot of managers or distributors will use this to say, kind of just to get an idea of what the route normally pays over a pay period. Obviously, telling someone, hey, your route pays 25 cents per copy, a lot of people don't quantify that as, okay, that's great, but what am I going to make a week? That's what they really want to know. Or what am I going to make every 2 weeks? And this is the best way to get that. Now, obviously, this will give you the copy rate pay. Adjustments, if there are any, if they're standard recurring adjustments like a subsidy or gas allowance, you can certainly tell them, well, there is, some sort of adjustment in it you'll get. Tips, obviously, obviously, if you go to explain tips to somebody, say, well, I can't guarantee you're going to get $10 in tips every day. So 1 week you might get $50, and next week you might get $0. But again, this gives the manager an idea. And in some cases, some of our distributors who have the local paper, sometimes the tips actually stay pretty consistent. A lot of people tip, when they pay their bill, what have you, they always tip $5, and you get enough of those. You end up getting almost like an extra $50 every week, even though it's from different people. So this is a good way to actually determine what actually a route pays. So when you go to sell the route, if it's vacant, you have an idea, hey, it generally pays this amount in copy rate pay, fluctuates based on circulation. Tips can range, this is where we tell managers, maybe take a look at 2 or 3 pay periods and say, look, over the last 3 pay periods, tips have ranged from maybe $20 to $30. So, this way you can tell them if they do a good job, hopefully you'll get that same amount of money, if not more, from customer tips. Again, the route report, actually, that's if you want to see actually where everything ended up and actually what you paid out the carriage for that particular pay period. So that's the actual difference. In a lot of cases, those 2 reports will be exactly the same. If the distributor didn't move any copies, they will reflect exactly the same reports. Excuse me, not the same reports. It will reflect exactly the same amounts on both reports. But if there is a difference due to the copy reassignment, again, what may have happened if we moved copies one day, the route report could show this route instead of the draw 749, it might show it as 680. And then this route over here may show that 80 copies moved, and it may show, instead of 1461, it may show 1541. So that would be the difference in the 2 reports there.
Okay.
Okay.
And these are weekly totals, correct?
It depends. These are totals based on the pay period set up.
Okay,
this particular
case, it would be a 2-week total.
Right. On this particular plan, it's set up as a biweekly pay period. So this would be a 2-week total. If the distributor informed us that they wanted a weekly payroll, then obviously these will be weekly numbers. So, to your point, Mark, I'm guessing where you're going with this. If this is biweekly and this is a biweekly total, and you want to tell a carrier, some people thinking, what do I make per week? Yes, you would have to actually divide the number in half. As far as that goes. But that's just a matter. The distributor would know that. Sometimes distributors don't even deal with that. Some of our distributors just say, No idea what you pay weekly, but here's what it is every 2 weeks. Do the math. If you want to average it out, you can average it out. Okay, so as you can see on this report here, it's very basic information as far as what the route number is, the draw, copy rate pay, complaint adjustments, net earnings, so forth and so on. Pretty standard columns there. Now, when we get to the DSP summary report, we click on that radio button, we'll load up this report. Basically, we're going to see all those same columns, but we are going to have a couple other new columns added. We actually have a DSP ID number, name, and the valid from, valid to dates. And actually, if we scroll down here, you can see here where we actually have route numbers. This is where we actually changed the route numbers, and I didn't get a chance to assign the DSPs to the new route numbers yet. That's why I actually had to go back in time to view this data here. But you see we actually have Mr. Randy Johnson assigned to the 0001 route. You see there's a valid from date. He's been on the route since April. He's still on the route designated by the 12/31/99. And for this particular pay period on that route, Randy had 943 copies. You can see his various stats there as far as what he made copy rate pay, complaints, and his nets. If Randy was actually assigned to another route, we would see that route listed here separately with his name next to it. Again, so this will actually break it down by route. Say, okay, Randy's on this route. We do have a case if we did have a route turnover. For instance, you can see right here, we did have a route. We had somebody assigned to the route, 328, but then their last day was 7/16. Now, this pay period runs from 6/26 to 7/9. So during this one particular pay period, they would have had the full amount of draw. Had this been the following pay period, though, this route would have only shown from 7/9, let me get my dates right, from 7/10, to 7/17. That DSP, in this case, it's the vacant DSP, which is distinguished by all nines. That would have meant the route was unassigned from 7/10 to 7/16. We would have the appropriate draw for those 6 days, and it would show what the amount would have been had someone actually been assigned to the route. So you always get a line item for the route if the route's vacant. You could get more than one line item, again, if you had route turnover. But ultimately, if you add all three of those numbers up, you'll pretty much come up to what the WAD route summary report would have said. So this breaks it down by route and DSP. Now, this is a very important report. We tell people usually when they're reviewing payroll, this is the best place to start. Because what you want to do is normally tell them group the routes together. You can sort on any column here in order to sort the data. And actually look for any kind of route turnover events. Now, assuming the rates are correct and the DSP is assigned to the routes all 14 days, the system's going to do the math correctly every time, unless the computer totally crashes and, the server blows up or something like that, which never happens, of course. But, once we have somebody assigned and the rates are there, it's always going to calculate. Again, the math's very simple, copy rate times draw, and get your amounts. So in most cases, it's just a matter of someone who's been on the route all 14 days. It's just a matter of looking at, hey, what is their total copy rate pay? Kind of make sure it's in par with what they made the previous week. Obviously, it won't be exact because of circulation change. But last week, this route made $186 because maybe the draw was, $1,162. So they may have made a little bit more money. But again, that's anyone who's been on the route all 14 days. It's a simple matter of saying, okay, let's make sure the copy rate pay is the same. Obviously, complaints and tips will fluctuate, so you can't really say, compare anything. You just have to say, hey, this person had a good delivery day or had a bad delivery day. And you can see in some cases here in this data, we have some routes actually have $18 or $17 worth of complaints. Any adjustments will certainly show up. So again, you'll be able to actually see how everything breaks down by the individual routes. And this way you can check each route individually. If it was a route turnover event, meaning that, the route was vacant and you put a carrier on it, then at that point, what we recommend is actually looking at the data and making sure that the active dates are correct. For instance, if we have somebody on 3/28 to 7/16, the route was vacant, maybe I contracted a carrier on 7/17. And when actually payroll runs, I want to make sure that those dates are correct, making sure that no one was on the route up to 7/16 and the new carrier's first day was 7/17. If I don't see that information correct there from the valid from and valid to dates on those two line items, then that means that I probably need to do an adjustment on that route, meaning either somebody forgot to unassign the old carrier and take them off the route and we're somehow overpaying them, or somebody forgot to put the new carrier on the route on the day they started, in which case we're underpaying them. And that, again, would warrant actually having to do an adjustment. So this is always the report we recommend people start out with. Now, you can export this data to Excel with the Excel icon there. Again, a lot of people will do that, and then actually they do whatever sorting or pivot tables or subtotals, and view in Excel. A lot of our distributors are very Excel savvy, so they usually export the data and take a look at everything that way. And a lot of times what some managers do is they'll actually, once they export it, they'll keep that file saved, because then they'll use that as a comparison for the following week. Again, a lot of them get very tricky with their formulas and say, okay, this route made this much last week. They do a quick lookup formula and kind of add a column so they can easily compare the numbers to see what might be different. Anything that's different, again, that could be a problem. And when I say a problem, meaning that somebody didn't assign or unassign a carrier correctly, or maybe copies got moved, anything that's different, it's pointed out very easily. And then it's just a matter, was that an explainable instance? Again, copies being moved, or oops, somebody forgot to do something and we need to put in an adjustment. So again, that's a preference as far as how someone wants to review it. It depends on, in some sense, the size of the plant. If you have a lot of data, this particular plant only has like maybe 10 routes in it. So most likely a distributor, if they had this plant, would probably just review everything right on the screen. If you have a large plant that maybe has 100, 200 routes and maybe 150 carriers, some carriers have more than one route, chances are you're probably going to export that data to Excel. A lot of people are a little more comfortable looking at it in Excel. And again, you can sort and subtotal things right in Excel as far as that goes. Okay, any questions on this particular report?
No, I think I'm good.
All right. Last report is called the DSP summary. And I'll just get this loaded up real quick. Now, the main difference in this report, basically on the other report, the DSP summary by route, if a carrier had multiple routes, it lists them individually. This report here, the DSP summary report, actually totals up everybody by DSP, and if they have multiple routes, it totals everything up together. So if Randy Johnson did have two different routes, we would actually, and one route paid $127, the other route paid $300, we would just see his name listed here once. His total draw for all the routes would be listed, total earned copy rate pay, everything that he did for basically a distributor would be listed here, total up in one line item. And then when we get to that last column, the final net earnings, that's actually what the carrier will be getting paid. So a lot of managers and distributors will actually use this as their final payroll report. We do actually have another report they can use here, which I'll jump on and show you toward the end of the call. But a lot of folks just take this data here. You can see it will actually have the payroll ID number, the person's name, and net amounts. They'll just export this data and send it off to their vendor. Or again, if they're doing their own books, they'll just use that data and say, okay, Mary Smith, I need to put in my computer, made $318 for this pay period. And their printer kicks out a check and they get the carrier paid. So that's the difference between the DSP summary and DSP summary by route. Is this report here actually totals everything up. Now, when they go to look at this report, you can see here we have that DSP with all nines, which is the indication of a route that was vacant and didn't have carriers assigned. So obviously, if they were sending this data off to a vendor, this is a case where they would, once they export this, they would not include that sending off to the vendor. Again, we don't issue a check to a blank person. And I think I mentioned to you on another call, there are certain payroll vendors PCF had where if we sent them a data to say issue a check for either zero amount or for a carrier doesn't exist, they would actually issue that check and charge us $7 for doing that for a check that does nothing. So we always recommend to a distributor, if they use this report, to make sure that they delete that line that says all nines. This way they don't send that off. And then everything else pretty much will be what the carriers are owed for that particular pay period. All righty. So those are, like I said, all those reports are very high level on this page. Again, it usually gives the total of each category as far as earned fees, complaints, adjustments, and net tips. And also, just so you guys know, from looking at that view run log, these four columns here are basically the four processes that we run, which are what's needed to actually pay the carrier. So these are very high level. Now, if ever you need to see a detail for something, perhaps you did think something was wrong, saying, hey, this route should have paid $184. Last week it only paid $150. And you need to figure out why. Well, from this screen, you're not going to be able to see the detail. And so that's actually a separate report, which is where we're going to go to next. Next report we're going to go to is the DSP comp, and we want to go to the DSP comp results. Now, this is used to pull up an individual DSP's data. You can see the search filters are pretty cut and dry. You can search by the payroll ID number if you happen to know it. More commonly, it's to search by first or last name. Now, the system does allow you to do like a parcel search. For instance, the two DSPs we had in there were Randy, I think, Smith and Mary Johnson. I may have their names wrong. But I can actually just type in, if I want to look for Mary Smith, I can just type in MA if I wanted to and do a search. And this would actually show up anyone's first name who begins with MA, whether it's Mary, Mark, anything along those lines. It would actually pull up that whole list. Obviously, the more letters you type in, the more specific you're going to get. And sometimes that's important because, again, someone like me, I would give my name as Jim Bakanowski, but in the payroll, it might be James Bakanowski. So if you search for Jim, you're not going to find it. You would have to go by James. So that's a case where people sometimes just put in a first initial and last name to do a search. Others type in the full name if they know what is in their payroll. But again, it's just a matter of typing enough letters to make sure you pull up data. And then, of course, if you have more than one item, you would have to click the select button. In this case, we only have one item, so it's very simple to do. We just simply click on select. A little confirmation window asking if this is the one you want to select. Again, when you only have one, it's obvious, but if you have more than one, it just makes sure that's the one you want to pick. And once you do that, the data will load up. Now, again, I'm going to change pay periods here to go back to when we actually had some data. And this is important, too, because, again, if you ever need to look up any history for a carrier, obviously you can select the pay period based on when they're saying, hey, you over or underpaid me. Again, as if the DSP is going to tell us we overpaid them. So once you load up that data, you can see here we do have a couple different tabs you can use. Some of them have monetary amounts in them. Right now we're on the summary tab, which actually gives a little bit of detail. On this particular route, the pay by copy, normal delivery fees, paid $177. The pay by address, which is our bulk delivery, the person made $7 on this particular route. So again, it kind of gives you a little more detail. You can see the adjustments where it says subsidy. There's a total of $140 on subsidy. We didn't have tips. And you can see complaint penalties. There's a total of $6. Now, that's the summary tab. Now, any one of these other tabs can give you more detail. For instance, if we click on the complaint penalty, it will actually show you that, okay, it'll give you the subscriber who actually complained, the date they complained, the reason code they use, MP, we use standard as missed paper, and the actual penalty amount the DSP was charged. So in this case, the DSP was charged 6 complaints. They'll be able to see what day they were charged. Each time was $1. And it does give the subscriber account number. Now, we don't have the address detail on here. That is available through another report if the carrier actually wants to say, hey, who are these people who complained? Well, in theory, they should already know because if they're getting their carrier mail every day, they would see the complaints listed right on there. But again, if not, you would go to a separate report on the complaints. You can actually pull up that data that way. For adjustments, again, any kind of adjustment detail, in this case, the adjustment says $140. You can see it actually lists the day of the week, a type of adjustment for frequency. It's a subsidy. Basically, it says every day, basically, this route made $10 as a subsidy. And it would actually list the dates there. Now, again, had this person not been on the route all days of the week, we would maybe see only 7 or 8 line entries, and the subsidy may have only been $80 or $90, if the route did turn over. Now, for delivery fees, you actually have 2 ways to look at the data. You can look at it in a grid view, which is the delivery fee breakdown. And sometimes this page takes a couple seconds to load, but it went pretty quick there. Basically, we have a grid view that'll basically tell you what product was delivered. There's a couple different views here. This is just by product and by date. You'd see on any given day, the VOSG was roughly about 50 to 60 copies. And you can see after this, on these days here, there was actually 0, which is actually why this check was not as much as you would expect for 2 weeks. According to the system, this route was only filled until 7/9. You can see the total amount paid there. Now, we also have a report that breaks it down just by delivery type. In this case, this route had all Z1 deliveries. And then the bottom report actually shows it broken down by product and delivery type. So if we actually had VOSG Z1 and if we had VOSG Z2, you would actually see each one of those individual line items broken down. So again, kind of a grid view. This is a good view to look at to actually kind of check to say, hey, when was the DSP assigned to the route? Did I unassign them correctly? You'll actually be able to see, like you can here, exactly what the last day was they got paid. Obviously, in this case, I would expect that somebody would have unassigned this DSP on the 4th of July. Probably went down to the beach and never came back, as we know, for DSPs. So again, this is a grid view, again, helpful view. The delivery fee tab, though, actually gives a lot more detail. And this is usually what people look at when they want to do some thorough investigation. What will happen here is we'll actually have the delivery date, the route, product, delivery type, and the draw. You'll see what the actual fee was paid. 50 cents total the rate was used. In this case, this particular item, this was actually paid as a bulk drop, I believe, where we paid PBA. It was 50 cents for the drop. It was the draw was actually 1. You can see here, there's another drop of 21. Excuse me, the address count was 21, and there was 22 total draw. Again, basically, it will break it down to actually, you'll be able to actually see what anyone's paid on any given day for any product delivery type combination. And if we scroll down, you can see here we have data for 7.3, 7.2, 7.1. Right now, this is all on the route, on the 003 route. If this DSP had multiple routes, again, if we scroll down far enough, we would actually see the next route listed after it got through all the dates for the 3 route, then the next route would actually be listed. So this is where we recommend people go if ever there's some sort of discrepancy. Why does a pay seem off? This is a spot to go to get the answer. You'll actually see what somebody was paid, individual for each product. Again, you'll be able to see whether it was a pay by copy, paid by rate, and you'll be able to actually see the earned fee broken down by product, where you might say, gee, this Wall Street Journal, WSJC, normally only paid $10 before. Now suddenly it pays $40. And you'll be able to see the discrepancy. You'll be able to see what fee was paid out. And that actually helps tell you what happened. Maybe someone changed the rate. Maybe something happened where someone decided that, hey, I'm going to put in an entry that I don't want to pay this by pay by address anymore. I'm going to pay it by the copy. So now obviously the copy got inflated because we're not paying by the drop anymore. So any kind of research, usually this is the page you recommend to use. Now, we don't have an export function on this, but it's a simple matter of highlighting the data, right-clicking, copy, and then you can open up Excel and paste the data in Excel. The Excel we're hoping to put an Excel export button there eventually, but currently it's not there. So.
Is there any way for the carrier to get in there and see this?
Not this level of detail. No.
If they thought it was wrong, they could actually go in there and view this, maybe via DSP portal or something.
Yeah, not to this level of detail. No, this is more or less compensation for the distributors only. However, that segues into what my next part is. This is where, from this section here, you can also produce an individual carrier statement, and this is where if you give the carrier enough of a detailed statement, that statement will probably give them everything they need. Now, in order to produce a statement, you can click on this PDF icon here, export the data. You'll get a window popping up asking what you want to include on the statement. Now, you can see here, each one of those tabs on that page, you can see we have a checkbox where as far as if you want to customize it, in most cases, most distributors put all the data on there. But if for some reason you just wanted to give somebody a summary, you could actually uncheck these other boxes and basically just show a summary report. You would click on the print button, and usually a summary for a single individual thing takes anywhere from 15 to 30 seconds. This one actually went rather quickly. So we'll open this up. Oops, I think we'll open it up. Okay, we'll open it up this way. And I kind of briefly showed you this before. Basically, on the carrier statement, they get pretty much that grid view that we showed you on the other page here. So they'll actually be able to see exactly their product, the draw for any given day, and actually the total earnings. Now, to your point, Mark, they won't see the detail as far as it saying, hey, I made 50 cents here for X amount and see the math per day. But in effect, they can actually, do the math themselves if they really wanted to. For instance, the Boston Globe here, for the copies, they could add all this up as far as the draw, divide it by the earnings, and they'll actually get their copy rate pay if they really needed that detail. And in this case,
do you have to import that one at a time, or is there a way to import all of your carriers and just go ahead and print all of your pay statements?
Yep, the pay statements, the all features on another page. This would just be, right now we're in the DSP summary report, where you only pull up one person individual data at a time. So that's why I can only produce one report at a time here. To your point, that's in the next report. We'll show you actually how to actually print up all the statements at once. But yes, that is a function. We wouldn't want to make someone sit there and log in everyone and do things one at a time. That's obviously not very good. Yeah. Nope. That's one of the questions we get. How do I print all of them up at once? I don't want to do them one at a time. And again, it's just part of the training. Fortunately, you save the best for last, the good news for last here. But you can see it does break it down. Again, if there are any PBA, this is the by address deliveries. So again, this is why even though the draw may say 19, the copy rate's not as high, where it's $7, where somewhere else where they, have a lot higher draw, it may actually pay like 40 or whatever. So it will break it down by the drop deliveries, the ones that pay by copy. Any complaints will be listed. You can see here, again, those 6 complaints. So you'll actually see, the subscriber to complain, the date, and the amount. Any adjustments, again, it'll be broken down as far as, what day and what the adjustment was for. Tips, I have another report I exported that actually shows some tips. We usually don't run tips in QA very often, but if there were tips, you would see that here. And ultimately, in the summary, it pretty much totals everything up as far as here's what they made for pay by copy. Here's the drop totals. Here's the adjustments. There were $6 in complaint penalties. So this DSP, for the time they were on the route, made a total of $318.26. And like I said, each one of these sections here, based on that checkbox, again, if you didn't want to put the complaints on, had you unchecked that complaint box, this section here, oops, I can't highlight it for some reason, this section here would not have shown up on the statement. So, like I said, in most cases, most distributors use everything because, again, you know how carriers are. They like to see all the detail. So usually we recommend that we print everything up, but it's up to them. If they decide they just want to do a summary and print out details upon request, they can certainly do that also. And actually, I'll open up the other statement now. This is a statement from one of our other plants here that I had to pull that actually has tips. But you see here, this is a little more detailed as far as, again, we do have a lot more products in this particular plant. You can see all the product codes there. These are all by copy delivery, Z1. You can see the various totals. I believe this plant is a bi-weekly, if I'm not mistaken. So basically, the bi-weekly total for copy rate pay is $265. We do have some other copies here with a different delivery type, Z8. This is our add inserts. Again, you can see there's only draw on certain days, meaning that some of these publications had an extra section that needed to be put in, some sort of circular or ad or what have you. You can see it was actually, there was one on that day, there's another on this day, and one on this day. That broke it down there. So again, the carrier sees that those extra sections on any given day, they are, in some cases, they did get paid for some of them, and they didn't get paid for others. And that's a distributor choice. This one may have been maybe a really small one. This one may have been a larger, bulky item. They decided they were going to pay some compensation for. So again, that's up to the manager to decide what they're going to do with actually inserts. Again, route adjustment, you can see this particular route actually had subsidy on it. And it looks like it was $8.50 for 6 days of the week, and then on Sunday they jumps up to $9.96. Not sure the logic there, but that's the subsidy they decided they wanted. So that's actually what's on there. And again, the tips, this is one of the reasons I want to show you this statement. As I mentioned, if there were tips on a route and you did use our tip processing system, this is actually how the tips would show up on the statement. You can see it would actually give the product client account number. It actually gives the subscriber name, their address, the initial tip they gave of $20. This particular plant does charge the admin fee of 10 cents. So the net amount paid to the carrier on that tip was $19.90. You basically see there's a 10-cent admin fee for each time. So basically the carrier, out of the $40.40 tip, there's a 40-cent surcharge. So the end result was they got $40 in tips. And then you can see the summary, again, totals everything up. By copies, there is no drop information or no drop copies here. Their adjustments totaled up. Tips gross was $40.40, the processing fee, the net tips, and then the total the carrier would actually pay. And again, you can see here, this particular statement is 300 for the whole plant is 383 pages. If a carrier does have more than one route, basically we'll see the routes are listed sequentially. In the sense, it'll go by the payroll reports are sorted first by the payroll ID number and then by the route. So if there was another route this carrier had, we first see the data for the lowest route number. Then once we get to the summary for that route, then it would go down to the next, they had another route. Actually, this person does. You can see they have the 3021. And again, we'll see copies here. Again, add inserts. There's a different subsidy on this route. They got 2 tips on this route. And again, this was the pay for the second route. So the statement's actually reduced, even though ultimately the carrier in this case makes $412 for this route and $427. the data from the other report, from the DSP pay summary, would have totaled these up, and the carrier would have made a total of $848 roughly. So the carrier check would have been for that, but then this actually breaks it down by route, saying, okay, you have 2 routes. This is the $400 you made for this route, and this is the other $400 you made for the other route. Okay, any questions on what a carrier statement might look like?
No, I think.
All right, cool. Okay, so now we're going to go to the last report, and that is the DSP, the View Comp Results page. Now, this page does take the longest to run out of all the reports we do. So when you click on this page, there may actually be up to a 45-second delay while it loads all the data. It will vary anywhere from 15 seconds to 45 seconds, depending on pretty much the size of the plant, how much circulation, how many different delivery types, products. There's no set way I can tell you other than, again, the larger the plant, usually takes a little bit longer. Now, once the page comes up, again, you have your normal filters. You do have to select the plant. Again, if a manager or distributor has more than one plant, they can only pull up one plant's data at a time. You actually want to select the payroll period. Again, we're going to pull up that payroll period where we had some data. And you do have secondary filters here. Now, right now, everything's set to all, so I pulled up data in this report down here for all routes. I can actually pull up individual people or individual routes or WOD routes as needed. Now, there's 2 things you can do from this report here. Number 1 is to answer your question before, Mark, how do I print up carrier statements for everybody? Basically, if you come to this report, choose your plant, and click the DSP's all, we have our little export to a PDF button here, which is how you would actually produce the statement. So if I actually wanted to click on that, again, I get the window saying, what do I actually want to print up, as far as what I want in the reports. I would click on print. Now, since it's for the whole plant, there is a little bit of a delay while it gets all the data together. Actually, should have been that much of a delay. We should have seen something come up that says the report's been initiated. There it goes, okay. We click OK. And now what it did, I was on the delivery fee tab. Now I'm on the PDF reports tab. Now, since we're doing it for the whole plant, and some of these plants can be very large, it actually goes into a processing queue, basically. So right now, the run ID is set. The status says initiated. This page doesn't automatically refresh, but you can click on this double circle there. You can see right now it's in progress. And normally the reports, again, depending on the size of the plant, again, it can be 10 to 15 minutes for the reports to actually get all compiled and set in a PDF format. Ultimately, though, hopefully this one won't take too long. Good, it didn't. But my screen's a little bit cut off here. Sorry about that. You can see there's a little orange circle with an arrow. The status actually says completed, or at least says 3/4 completed there. All you need to do is actually click on that particular button, and I can actually download the statements. It's going to ask me where I want to save it. And in this case, I saved it to my desktop. So this is actually the report I just downloaded here. You can see this report is 13 pages. Again, there's not a lot of data in here because of the fact that, you see Mary Smith's there. We only have like 3 carriers assigned to the routes. So there's not a lot of statements. But this is how you would actually print up all the reports for all the carriers at once. Let me get back to the screen here. So from this screen here, you can do all, or again, in theory, you could actually select an individual person and print up an individual statement from here if you wanted to also. But this is where you're going to actually do all. Any questions on how to do the statements from this page?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to go back to the delivery fee tab, and we're going to load the data up to make sure we have the data. Now, from this page here, this is a very important report that distributors should use. This actually gives them a grid view of, now since I had all the data, all the routes here, this actually gives a grid view of exactly what was delivered during that pay period. So you can see in this particular plant for the BOSG Z1 delivery, there was a total of 3,973 papers delivered. You can see the address was 3925, meaning somewhere there are a couple addresses that are getting more than one paper. You can actually see, since we didn't have tips in this part of the system, tips were 0 for that particular product. Complaint penalty, you see no complaint penalties on that one, but you can see for actually the NYT product, you can see we did actually have complaint penalties there of $170 total. Also, you can look at, you can see the earned fee paid out for each publication and delivery type combination. Excuse me, losing my voice here. Now, this is good data to analyze to make sure, again, you're not over or underpaying for your compensation. What we recommend that distributors do is, again, we do recommend they export this data and kind of get a running tally of what they actually pay out in compensation each week for any given product. So, for example, if for the BOSG product, based on the fact I had a draw of $39.73, if this is the correct number here, I would pay out $481 in copy rate pay. I would expect a similar thing to happen next pay period, where again, if my draw is comparable, maybe I have $4,000 in draw, I would roughly expect my earned fee and compensation to pay out roughly the same. Now, that number's higher or lower, that's where you have to say, okay, what may have happened to affect that? Now, one thing that could affect it is maybe you had some routes that carriers left and the routes are now vacant. Maybe there was some extra copies that were delivered, a bonus day sample, what have you. Again, you should be able to tell that by delivery type. But ultimately, you're looking for something out of the ordinary. If you had the same amount of draw, and this week you pay out $480, you have roughly the same draw next week, and you paid out $600, that is, in a sense, a red flag. Something changed. And the question is what? Now, there's only really two things that could have changed. Somebody, either the draw increased, which would affect your comp, or somebody changed the rate. And that's usually what it ends up being, is if there's something less or more, it usually means somebody did a rate change. And as long as that rate change is justified, meaning that, yeah, I did negotiate with two carriers and did give them an increase, so that explains my increase in comp, that makes sense. If that does, if they're not expecting that number to go up, then that means there's a problem. And like I said, usually it means someone put in a rate change they weren't supposed to, or something along those lines. Or somebody switched something from pay by address to pay by copy, and it didn't calculate because of that, so the compensation was inflated. Now, anywhere you see a total, there's usually what we call a hyperlink. You can see it's kind of highlighted in blue with an underline. You can actually click on any one of those links and get a little more detail if you want. Now, right now, it's showing all the DSPs listed here. You do have a filter up top. So right now, it's showing all the routes, basically, the WAD route. It also shows you the regular route. So if there was a copy reassignment, this is where you'll actually be able to see it. You'll be able to see if copies are reassigned. You'll see the product delivery type, again, the draw and address count. There was earned fee paid out, whether it was paid by copy, paid by address. And again, we have to scroll down a little bit here we go. You can see the rate level that was used. Of course, it'd be nice if we saw the headers. Let me see. That is, yeah. So the rate level used and if there was a scale involved. So in this case, this particular item paid out 16 cents. The draw was 54, and the total earnings would have been $8.64. So again, now this just shows for that one particular product and delivery type that you actually clicked on for that link. But if you suspect something is wrong, this is where you can go right into the detail to see what is wrong. Hopefully something jumps out at you, whether, again, you'll see something that says PBC where you're expecting it to say PBA. Again, you may see a level. Again, you see here some things paid out at level 40, others paid out at level 10. So this would be a case of you might say, I didn't expect this route usually pays out this particular product at level 40. Now it paid out at level 10. That tells you that someone put in a new rate, and obviously the new rate calculated over, the level 10 rather than level 40. So this is where you can actually go to get all the detail. Now, you can only open up one particular product at a time with each hyperlink. But as you saw, I'm not sure to open this up again, you can download each one of these to Excel. Now, also, you can do the same thing for a complaint penalty. We actually open up the complaint penalty. Again, you can actually see all the complaints that were charged for that product. So again, you have the route number, the client, the date, the reason code, and the penalty. And this could become useful, let's say on one particular day, the New York Times truck was late. And you decided, you know what? In retrospect, we have a complaint penalty that automatically happens that charges the DSP. But maybe you decide as a manager, you know what? I'm going to waive complaints for that one particular day the truck was late. So this is a simple way to say, okay, it was the New York Times that caused the problem, so I'm going to waive New York Times complaints. So you can go in here, export this to Excel, sort by, complaint date, say, okay, anything that came in on 7/6, I'm actually going to put in an adjustment for to credit the DSP for those complaints. And again, the nice thing here is you actually not only have the complaint date, you'll have the amount, you'll actually have the route, DSP assigned to it. So all the data is right there for everything you need to get together a manual adjustment file. It's just a matter of getting your subtotals and then pasting it into the adjustment format. And so basically, that's where you can use that same thing for adjustments. Pardon me. If you want to click on the adjustments, Okay, we must not have data in here for QA. But again, you would see a report that would actually list the various adjustments and what they actually are. And again, if for some reason you need to review that data just as a group, that would be actually one way to actually get that information. So again, so there's a lot of good information here. Ultimately, we even tell managers also check your total in order to actually see, again, make sure that your comp that you pay out this pay period is comparable to what you paid out last pay period. If it's not, obviously, you're going to have circulation change. But if it's, if the draw is the same and you're paying out more or less, that's something you need to take a step back and say, okay, what changed? And that's where, like I said, that's how you actually help spot problems as far as that goes. Okay, that's pretty much it for this particular report. Any questions on that?
Don't think so.
Okay. All right. Okay.
You need to take a breath. You've been talking a while.
Yeah, I just took a moment to take a sip of water there. I was starting to get a little bit of a scratchy throat, so I'm actually refueled for another 10-15 minutes here. There you go. All right, so now ultimately, all this is stuff that, again, it seems like a lot, but once the managed distributors get used to the system, they'll be able to navigate through here pretty quickly. Again, a lot of them use the Excel method where they export some data to Excel and do a compare week, pay period over pay period. I shouldn't say week over week. It's pay period over pay period. Ultimately, once they review their data, two scenarios are going to happen. Number one, they find something that's not right and warrants either a rate correction or an adjustment. Now, as we mentioned, you can backdate those items. So if they do find something's incorrect, meaning I forgot to pay a carrier for helping out on the route, I want to do a complaint credit after I see this. It's like, oh, geez, I don't want to charge for that date. I want to put an adjustment to credit those complaints back. You can go in and put in that adjustment. And once you put in that adjustment, you would upload it, making sure it's dated for the previous pay period. And then you would end up going to your DSP runs. You go to your rerun, and you would actually kick off a rerun process. And I think I did show you this the other day. It's a simple matter of clicking on rerun. Again, you can put in a text comment if you want. It says it's mandatory, but it's actually optional. We'll just put in a test there. I'll say that you're going to delete the existing run, and then the fees are going to be recalculated. Do you want to continue? The answer is yes, because if I put in an adjustment, I want to see that adjustment now included in the calculations. And we click OK, and after a small delay here, we'll get a window popping up saying it's been initiated. And now we'll jump us to the view run log page. You can see everything's in the stage status right now. Again, this is where we use the auto timer, or auto refresh, excuse me. I used to set it for 10 seconds. And now we'll start the countdown, and this page will refresh. Ultimately, I would wait until each one of those ended up saying completed. Once it said completed, now I would go back in, and whatever item I changed, if I had one adjustment where I forgot to pay someone $30, once everything completes, I go back into my payroll and look at that particular carrier. Now, I should see an increase of $30 on that particular carrier's pay because that's the adjustment I put in. And again, basically, it's wash, rinse, repeat as often as needed. Review the payroll. Again, if you find anything that's wrong, put in whatever adjustment or rate change is needed, rerun the payroll, and ultimately, whether it takes 1 time or 10 times, eventually everything's going to be finalized, meaning, okay, all this data is correct, everyone's getting paid correctly. What's the next step from there? We'll wait for this to actually finish up before we do anything here. Should be finished up, hopefully, in the next 30 seconds. I think this plan took about a minute to run last time. Awkward silence while we wait for it to count down. Okay. Well, ultimately, this will finish up and say completed. The next step, I'll talk as it does it. The next step, once everything's finalized, there's 2 final things the manager should do. There we go, just complete it out. So now that everything's finalized, the business practice we always recommend, and again, I did mention this on another training call, is once everything's finalized, the next step is to close the pay period out. And again, that's very important from a financial standpoint. I should say, maybe that's wrong what I say. Financial and tax accounting standpoint, you want to make sure that once you're finalized, because after you close the pay period, the next steps are sending the information off to your payroll vendor or printing checks, whichever you're doing, and printing the carrier statements. So you want to make sure whatever data is in here, in the completed system, you want to make sure it all matches. And that also comes into play for when income tax time comes, you have to issue 1099s. So ultimately, we would end up going to the DSP comp, we go to the view run log, we would go to close the pay period. Now, I actually am going to close the pay period here since we're pretty much almost at the end of it anyway, and we probably won't be going in here for anything else. Basically, all I would do is close the pay period out. You always get that confirmation saying, are you sure you want to do it? Click OK. It's very anticlimactic here. It just says pay period has been closed. Click OK. And now you can see it actually tells you who actually closed the pay period, the date they did it on. Now, you notice I don't have a closed pay period link here anymore. And also, if I go back to the rerun page, I now don't have any kind of rerun link. This means that no one can change this payroll now. The data that's in the system is part of history. But that's what I want, because now I actually want to go and I would produce the carrier statements. So in order to produce the carrier statements, as we mentioned, it would just be a matter of going to the View Comp Results page. I won't do the whole process again, but I'll just go through the motions here. We'll select our plant when the page loads up and wait for the data to load. So we select the plant, 502. Select whatever pay period we're doing. In most cases, it would be the most recent one. In this case, I'm going to go back to that one pay period we have data. And then I would actually click on the PDF export in order to get the statements. That would be step one. Now, step two is actually I need to get my carriers paid, which is a matter of either determining what the final amount is for me to print up checks myself or to send the information off to a payroll vendor. And in that case, that's where we go to the DSP comp. We have to go back to our page summary report. And again, we select the plant, we select the appropriate pay period. We want to make sure we're on the DSP summary report. Now, it does open up on that page, but I always recommend you click the load button anyway, just to make sure you're loading the most current data. Now, what you can do here, as I mentioned, there's two ways you can do this. You can actually either export this to Excel, and again, you can see here it has the payroll ID number, carrier's name, and it does have the net earnings. Again, this is where you would have to instruct the distributor to have a conversation with their vendor. We're not sure what data the vendor may need. In some cases, we've heard of some distributors where they've hooked onto a vendor, and basically the vendor directs them to a website. They have to actually input each DSP's data manually themselves into the website. So it depends on whether it's that type of functionality with the vendor, or does the vendor want a file that file is then uploaded in by the vendor, or maybe it's keyed in manually by the vendor itself. From that standpoint, in most cases, that's details they have to work out with that vendor. From our standpoint is we just need to make sure they have the data that they need. So in this case, it would just be a simple matter of exporting it to Excel. In this case, we'll actually open it up. Now, once it's in Excel, you can see here, basically it exports what was on the screen. Once it's in Excel, they can actually save it in whatever file format the vendor needs. Whether it's they want it in the most current version of Excel, whether they need it in Excel 2003, they may want it as a CSV, maybe they want it as a tab delimited. Again, we've never had a problem where once we get the file into Excel, vendors will accept one of these formats, some sort of Excel version of the format. So again, that's something that's, as I mentioned, a conversation that the distributor will have to have with the vendor. Actually, we'll close this out. Now, again, the vendor may also not need all this information. They may say, I don't need these columns here. I just need basically, this data right here. It may just be a simple upload of give me the payroll number, give me the name just to make sure we match it up, and give me what you want to check to be. It may be that simple. Others want more detail. Now, this is one version of the report. We'll actually close that out. Another option they have is actually using this button here where it says download accounting format. If we actually click on that, we'll get a little window that says the format's initiated. Again, it is going to open up in Excel. Sometimes, again, depending on the size of the plant, it may take a few seconds to 45 seconds. In this case, it went rather quickly. Now, this kind of gives a similar type breakdown, but it actually does it by line item. So you can see here, Miss Mary Smith, you can see it's listed 4 times, but you can see there's some adjustments she made as far as they were earnings. And that's that subsidy that we saw where she made $140 subsidy. That's what the adjustment came. You see complaint penalties was actually deduction, so that's the $6 deduction. The deliveries for the drop, $7, delivery by copies. So ultimately, this may be what the vendor may want. They want something more detailed to say, hey, we need it breaking down by categories and whether or not it's a plus or minus. So again, this is a format that's optional. Again, this is what I would consider a slightly more advanced finance accounting. Some people and vendors like this report. Others are okay, just give me with the final amount. So it really depends on, again, that conversation with the vendor. But we do have two options of how to export the data. One of them should be acceptable by the vendor. And, in most cases, we tell the distributor, give them both and let the vendor tell you which one they want. And then go from there accordingly. Again, it's just a matter of either the export to Excel or the download accounting format. And as you saw, actually, it does open up in Excel, same thing. Once it opens up in Excel, that report, if the vendor needs it in a CSV or tab delimited, it's just a simple matter of saving under the appropriate format. And then, of course, that's pretty much is it. Again, your payroll is now history. You've issued carrier statements that will match the checks. And when you go to issue 1099s, everything will all total up, and everybody should be happy, the IRS, the carriers, and hopefully the distributor is making a profit, and it's happy also. So that pretty much wraps up our payroll review and also the various reports we have. Any questions or any final items that we might want to bring up?
No. It's a lot to digest, but
yeah, there's a lot of different reports.
Friendly.
Yeah, there's a lot of different reports. It's just what you'll find is the distributors. Usually they'll end up being on the DSP pay summary page and the view comp results page quite frequently. So those will be the two reports they'll get used to the most. The DSP comp results page, some of them don't go there all the time. Again, if they have a good payroll run, they may not have questions for a week or two or three. And if something does come up where a carrier questions something, that's where they might, call you up or Mark and say, hey, I need to do some investigation. Where do I go to get that detail? They may just forget, that report's there. So that's usually the most common thing that happens. And again, the other common questions we get are, how can I view certain data? Again, we do have those hyperlinks on the view comp result reports. One other item, Mark, that we do have, and it's probably not going to be in QA here in this plant very well, but under the view run log, we do have a couple reports that are available. You can see here under, for instance, I just did that payroll rerun for adjustment tips, complaint, delivery fees. There is a hyperlink over on the side here. So if I actually click on the hyperlink from the line that says tips, if there were tips in this plant, we'll get some sub-reports. Now, again, we don't have tips in here, so I can't click on it, but you'll actually have a report of if the plant uploaded, say, $1,000 worth of tips, the total term tip records created would actually be there. Now, even though we uploaded $1,000 worth of tips, as you know, some of the tips could have got assigned to routes that were vacant. So it might show a detailed report of out of that $1,000 worth of tips, and maybe it was 100 line items. Maybe 90 of those line items out of 100 got assigned to routes, and that would be the report here. This report down here where it says total earned tips with no DSP assigned to the route, that would show the other 10 items that didn't get assigned to a route, and they wouldn't be able to determine what they wanted to do with that money. Now, basically, that money was earned by carriers, but if the carrier is no longer with them, they have to make a decision to say, all right, Mark, you maybe were on the route for 3 years, and finally you left, you gave notice, I wish you didn't leave, I wish you'd come back. But then, during the last pay period, there were some tips that hit your route, but now, you're no longer assigned to the route. You left in the middle of the pay period. As a manager, I may say, well, you know what, Mark earned those tips. He's been on there for 3 years. I want to do a manual adjustment for, those tips that got assigned to his route, during the time he wasn't on. In other cases, it might be a route that's been turning over, and you have people on there for 2 or 3 days trying it and not staying. Now, if you have any tips hit the route at that point, you may not want to give that tip money to those carriers. Again, they've been only on it 2 or 3 days, so you're going to give them tips. Chances are they were probably riding with anyone doing a demo, so they really haven't earned the tip. So ultimately, that's just a report that we recommend that the distributors use. It shows them, again, what the tips actually were and what were unassigned. And that unassigned money, it's up to them what they want to do with it. In theory, they could keep it. Again, no one's on the route, so it's not like a carrier is going to complain about not getting it. And maybe they keep that money. I jokingly tell distributors you keep that for late truck money. When there's a late truck, that's money you use for coffee and donuts. Or maybe, again, you give it to maybe an employee who's been actually delivering the route. Since it's been a vacant route, maybe you give him a little extra money. Again, maybe you decide, hey, there's a lot of tip money. I'll total up over the course of a month or two, and maybe it comes to $1,000, and maybe I'll just do some adjustments and spread it out over all the DSPs. It's really their choice is what they want to do with that money. but it is money that they actually should have gotten, you should have received. It just didn't get assigned in their payroll.
Okay.
Now also, there's a report for the complaint penalties. This one will probably see some data here. You see, this is what it would look like if there is information. You see here, total complaint penalties records created. You can see there were 35 in this plan. Total complaint records with no DSP assigned to the route. So we have a couple other reports here. So again, if I actually clicked on this link here, this would be a case. Now, if you remember on that other page where I was on the view comp results page, that report only I would have been able to pull up data by product. This is a case where I think we only had complaints from the New York Times in this plant, but this would actually pull up all the complaints, for all products, all delivery types, all routes. And again, this would be a useful report, again, to analyze complaints. Again, if there was some reason where you needed to do some sort of credit for some reason, whether it was bad weather, late truck, or what have you, you would have all the information here. And again, you had the amount that was charged, the date, actually would be the complaint date, the route, and the DSP. All that information would be here so that, again, if some sort of manual adjustment was warranted for some special occasion, you don't have to worry about clicking each product to get the detail and then sorting it that way. This particular report gives it all at once. And again, the nice thing is this report shows you, it doesn't show you the complaints that were on routes that were vacant, meaning that if a carrier was only on the route 3 days and got complaints, they would show up in this report for 3 days worth of complaints. You wouldn't see the complaints on the vacant. So this way you wouldn't credit them more than they should, in a sense. Again, now these reports here on this screen, Mark, are only available after payroll. So they won't be able to view, tips before payroll runs. They won't be able to view that complaint summary before. But once payroll runs, those reports are available. And again, you can click on the link there. Again, that's something. The tip one and the complaint one are usually the reports that people use the most. The delivery fee, again, that one can get a little bit, I'll say, clunky, in the sense that depending on how large the plant is, if they try to get all the details at once, the system in theory could time out. Again, it depends on the plant size, meaning if it's trying to get delivery fee records for 50,000 items or maybe 100,000 items for the whole pay period, again, there is a chance the system could time out. So we don't recommend using the reports on the delivery fee if it's a large plant. Again, the way to go there would be to use the view comp results page or to look up individual items. But again, it varies. Again, they could certainly try opening up the report. The system will certainly try. If it's too large, they'll get a timeout message, and that just tells me I have to go to another reports view that way.
Okay.
I think that's it as far as what's eligible for reports. But again, I think what you'll find, Mark, especially if there are tips involved and they're going to use the tip processing system here that we showed you earlier, they'll use that tip report quite frequently. That, believe it or not, probably 25 to 50% of the questions I get from the distributors are dealing with tips because they think, hey, am I shortchanging someone? Where's that data? How do I know I got X amount from the publisher, but my payroll only paid out, Y? Where's the difference? Well, that's where you got to go to that tip report and you'll see where the difference is. And that's where I tell them, then you decide what you want to do with that money that's on the vacant routes, basically. So that's usually the most question I get. And when I say that's when distributors first start out. After, 2 or 3 payroll runs, they know the report's there to look for it. But that's a very common question we get when someone first goes live with our system for tips. They want to see that report because, again, from their standpoint, they're looking at, I received, 1,000, my comp paid out 900. They're wondering where that $100 is. And, it gets them worried. It's like, well, I got paid for it. Why am I not paying it out? What's going on? Who am I shortchanging? And of course, in their mind, they're thinking, what carrier am I pissing off that I'm not giving $100 tip to? So that's, like you said, that's the most common question we get for the first 2 or 3 payroll periods deals with tips, as far as that goes. So just to prepare you for it, it is a very common item. And once we show them that report once or twice, very rarely do we hear from them again, because again, it's very simple to do. Again, you get $1,000, you export those 2 reports. One will be 900, one will be 100. It totals up to 1,000. Everything balances out. They know exactly what happened. So. All right, that should be a wrap for today, unless you guys have any questions. If not, I will actually stop recording.
Nothing on my end.
Ever, you've been awful quiet?
Yes, I have.
I know.
He always is.